Today I'm going to be showing you how to change the front struts in a 2012 F150. This is a two-wheel drive version. We've got our Monroe quick struts, and the reason we're replacing this whole assembly is because that one's got a busted spring right there. Take your 19mm and remove the lug nuts. Take your tire off. Next we're going to remove the bottom bolt and nut for the strut. It's 1 1/16" on the head side, which I have a wrench on, and I'm using 1 3/16" on the nut side. So we'll try to remove that with an impact. Probably knock my phone off, but get in there with a hammer and tap that out. Might have to finish it off with a punch to get it out. Just depends on how much pressure is on the strut. Or once you hit the threads, you could probably back it out by hand like I'm doing, or even put your impact on there and pull it out quicker. After that, you'll move up top. You got 3 nuts on top. With this model, you can reach all 3 nuts from right here in the wheel well, or you can pop the hood and there's not much above it, as you can see. So if you want to use an air ratchet or something, which I might end up doing, these are 15mm, so you can get at them with a ratcheting wrench here. Or if you want it to go quicker, like I said, you can get on there with an air ratchet after you break them loose. Finish removing the nuts, and there's nothing else holding it attached. Sometimes there's enough play in between the control arm where it's bolted up on the bottom and the housing up top that you can wiggle them out of there. This one I may have to either disconnect a sway bar link or tie rod or something to allow things to drop down a little lower, because it doesn't look like I can work it out. This has to come up out of this little pocket here. Sometimes they don't have a pocket, they're just fitting into a little flange, but I'll mess with it just a little bit more. I might put a pry bar on this to try and lower the control arm a little bit. You see, I can put some weight on it and get it down a little bit. Next, I'm going to remove the 21mm nut on the upper ball joint, and then I'm going to smack this a few times with the hammer, trying to get that to pop loose so the knuckle can sag down and hopefully give us enough play to pull this out. And if that doesn't work, then I'll attempt to take the sway bar link loose so that the whole assembly can lower down enough to get the strut out. But hopefully just the upper ball joint separation will allow it to move far enough. All right, still not going low enough, so we're gonna take the sway bar link off. We're gonna have to hold that still because it's just spinning. So use an 8mm on the top and an 18 on the bottom. Just hold that stud still while you finish removing this nut. So just loosening the nut and allowing that to drop another inch and a half was enough to get the strut to pop up out of this pocket. So you don't have to remove the sway bar link altogether. You can just loosen it, and that'll be enough to get the strut out. So I don't know if I can get this out with one hand or not, but I might have to go wiggle it around a little bit to get it down and out. You want to be really careful with something like this. It's got a broken spring, because all it would take is for the remainder of that spring to slip off of the spring cup, because it's a bigger diameter. So if it slips off that spring cup, this thing can explode. I think this one is stable, but Just be careful. You can't go dropping it on the floor or throwing it in a bucket or something with your scrap metal. It might just pop. All right, once you're gonna get it worked into place here, you can finger tighten your nuts. And then you wanna, I had to use a pry bar on the front side of this to get it shoved back into that slot and make sure it was kind of aligned. And then we got a jack underneath here now to lift this up to line up that hole so you can get your bolt started. That bolt started, and then you can go ahead and tighten down your nuts on the top, those 15s, and then we can go back to putting everything back together. So sway bar link tightened up, put your upper ball joint nut back on the knuckle here, and get your tire back on. Tried to run this one down, but I bet it'll just spin. Oh, nope, actually worked. So I've got a jack with some pressure on the control arm from the bottom, and then I'm going to use this pry bar to push down on the upper control arm while I try to run this nut on with an impact, but it's spinning already. So you got to have some pretty good pressure in the down position so that that ball joint is pressed inside of this cone. Otherwise that's just going to spin. All right, with that upper control arm reattached and tightened up, we can lower the jack. And put our tire and wheel back on, and that's how you change the front strut on a 2012 F150. Same for a couple other years in the same range. If you like today's video, please subscribe to the channel.